Hey everybody, how are you today? It is Monday. Welcome to Get Ready With Me and Talk About Stuff. Before we dive into today's subject, how are you doing? How was your weekend? My weekend was spent, once again, not feeling well. I don't know what's going on. I seem to get a lot of headaches lately. My body just is not happy with me these days. It is what it is, and it's just part of having a chronic illness, I guess. And it's really annoying, but what are you going to do? So anyway, the subject I'm going to be talking about today, I just want to give a little bit of a forewarning. It is kind of an intense subject, but I think it's an important one to talk about. I did ask people on Twitter what subject they wanted me to cover next, and I gave a few options, and discussing recovery during the holidays / stressful times is what people chose. So that's what I'm going to talk about today. It's going to be interesting because my son is in the background chatting with someone, and I'm doing my best not to be distracted by it, but I can't promise you anything. This is just one of the joys of sharing a relatively small space. Anyhow, so what we're going to be discussing today is maintaining sobriety during the holidays. And I will be getting into some discussion of my own struggles and my own history with substance abuse. So if that's something that might be triggering to you, then I would just recommend you not watch the video. I don't want to do something that's going to make things difficult for you. It's already hard enough to, maintain sobriety and, get through the day-to-day without adding things to the struggle. But if you're going to hang out with me, thank you. I really like having you here. And I'm going to just speak very candidly about my own experiences and what I do to stop myself from relapsing, falling back into old habits. So my struggle with substance abuse began when I had cancer in 2007. Prior to that, I didn't really use anything. I mean, if I had a headache, I wouldn't even take Tylenol until I absolutely couldn't stand it, and if I could tough it out, I would. I would not, I didn't take medications for anything. I didn't feel the need. And then I had cancer in 2007, and that changed everything. I had surgery to have a cancerous tumor removed from my kidney. They also took out my kidney while they were at it. And after that, it was kind of a pretty quick downward spiral into addiction, because I needed medication to manage pain from the surgery. And then I discovered that along with managing pain, it also helped me sleep, which meant I could escape the growing depression that I was feeling. So in so many ways, having cancer changed my life. And my struggle with addiction began then. Fast forward a few years, I learned that being a cancer patient, even though I was... I don't know that they ever said that I'm technically in remission, but it wasn't an active cancer anymore. I know that much. But I knew that, being a cancer patient, even one that didn't have any cancer actively growing in my body, I could still use that, I learned, as a means to get medications. And it's not something I'm proud of, but at the same time, I'm a big believer that the things that you do when you're in the midst of your addiction don't need to be a source of shame for you. You own what you did, you take responsibility for it, but carrying around shame over it is not helpful to anybody. And I just missed a big step in my process. That's okay though. We're just going to carry on. Okay, I'm back. Hopefully we can have a little more peace and quiet now. Anyway, so I learned that I could use my cancer diagnosis as a means of getting access to more medication. And as I said, it's not something that I'm proud of, but at the same time, I refuse to carry around shame for that. I've taken responsibility for that behavior, and, you know, I'm just not going to be shamed by the things I did while I was in the midst of my addiction. Anyway, so this went on for a few years, and it wasn't until, now keep in mind, I had a child, I had a baby in 2008, so this addiction that I struggled with was very much a present part of my, you know, unfortunately, being a new mom. That was something that I dealt with when I had my child, my son. And, you know, there wasn't really a time when my son was ever in any danger. It wasn't anything like that, but it definitely meant that I was not fully present as a parent. And to this day, that's something that I struggle with a lot of guilt about that. But again, things are what they are. We can't go back and undo the things that we did when we were in the midst of addiction, and it doesn't do any good to anyone to carry around shame and guilt. So when I start feeling those feelings, I have to remind myself that I was not in a healthy state of mind and I made some bad choices, but that doesn't mean I need to be punished for the rest of my life for the bad choices that I made. I'm fine, my son is fine, life is good, and we got through it. But when I was in the midst of my addiction, I did indeed make some bad choices. When my son was about 5, I finally decided it was time to get some help. And I asked my doctor for help. I told him that I wanted to get off all the medications that I was on. By the time that I got help with the addiction, I was on so much medication. The doctor that was treating me told me that I was on the kind of medication, you know, the amount of medication they would typically give to hospice patients. He said that both the amount of medication I was on and the type is the kind, it was at a volume that they would give to somebody who wasn't going to be with us much longer and just wanted to be comfortable during their last days. And now we can get into discussion all day long about, well, why did the doctor give it to you? If it was, you know, if it wasn't what you needed. And there is something to be said for that question. I do think that at that time, and bear in mind, this would have been 2013. At that time, I do think doctors were prescribing medications pretty freely. And it wasn't hard to get narcotics at all. Especially if you had a cancer diagnosis. I never took medications that were not prescribed to me. I did not do doctor shopping. I didn't do any of that. But the doctor that I went to on a regular basis, you know, they were pretty willing to give me the medications that they believed I needed. And I was more than willing to take them. So it got us into a very unhealthy cycle. And I finally reached a point where I realized I was just in a really bad place. My entire life, and consequently my son's life, was lived in this apartment that, you know, we didn't really have friends. We didn't have really anything going on other than just existing in this apartment day in and day out. And I knew that was not the kind of life I wanted for myself, and it certainly wasn't what I wanted for my son. So I asked my doctor for help, and he was more than happy to help me, thank goodness. I also had family who was willing to help me, which I'm very fortunate to have, because unfortunately, a lot of times people who are in the throes of addiction, they lose that support. Their family reaches a point where they just can't deal with it anymore and they're done. And I'm very, very lucky that I had family that stuck with me. So when I decided I was ready to do this, I didn't go into a rehab facility, and I will tell you right now that was a mistake. I strongly advise anybody who's going through any kind of detox to go into some sort of supervised care to do it, because what I was about to go through could have been very dangerous, you know. And I did it at home. My mom was out of town, but my dad took my son for me and looked after him for the first several days of my detox. And I'm so glad that he did, because there is no way that I could have handled detoxing and looking after my son at the same time. There is just no way. I was so very, very sick. And I fully understand why people relapse in those early days. And, you know, anybody who's not been through it can't possibly understand what it's like. But detoxing is like, it is a waking nightmare, especially those first few days. The first 72 hours or so are very, very tough. And if you do not have the right kind of support to get through it, you're going to have a bad time. And that's, you know, that's when people often will relapse, because the amount of pain you're dealing with, the amount of restlessness, just so much going on with your body and with your mind, and your mind is racing and you can't slow it down, and there's just so much happening. And so I was going through all that, and it took about almost a full week before I finally woke up for the first time in years without cravings. And that was the beginning of a new life. What I found out, though, and that's kind of what I'm going to get into today, I wanted to give you a little bit of a background. Now, if you've been watching my videos and if you've read my book, you know a little bit more about the history that I'm going to get into here. But what I want to talk about today is what comes after the detox. The detox is physically probably the most painful part of recovery, but it's not the hardest part. Compared to what happens next, I think that the detox is probably the easy part. And I'm saying that fully acknowledging that detox is hell. It's absolute, utter hell. But it is the easiest part of recovery. All right, I am back. Do you like my hat? I put earrings on because with my hat on, it kind of made me look like Stephanie the Derpy Christmas elf. So I think the earrings just add a little bit of extra punch to make this work. Anyway, so regarding staying sober through stressful times, through the holidays, which can be stressful, first and foremost, I would say have a plan. Now, I am not an expert on addiction or anything of that nature. I am just telling you my lived experience as somebody who's in recovery. I know from my own experiences that if I don't have some kind of a plan, that I'm in trouble. So we're kind of fortunate this year in a way. I mean, we're going to find the silver linings here. There aren't as many Christmas or holiday parties happening as there otherwise might be. That is one of the upside of the downside of the pandemic. There aren't as many gatherings happening. If you're somebody who's in recovery, especially if this is your first holiday season in recovery, that could be very good news, because that means that you're not going to be getting invited to a lot of parties. There's not going to be as many opportunities for you to relapse as there otherwise might be. So we're going to take the silver lining here and say that that's good. Under any other circumstances, though, let's say it's any other year, understand that, you know, you might have to say no to some gatherings if you know that there's going to be alcohol there, and it's all going to depend on what you can handle. If you can go and you can resist the temptation, I guess, great, good for you. Some people can't, and that's fine too. Or another option might be if you're going to go to a gathering of some kind where you know there's going to be alcohol and you know that you're going to want to drink, or you know that there will be other substances there and you're going to want to use, have a sober buddy. You know, make sure there's somebody with you who, you know, is willing to not partake with you. And because it can be difficult when everybody else is drinking or using and you're the only one who's not. I'm not going to pretend that's an easy situation to be in. But it does happen. So if that's the situation you find yourself in, try to have somebody with you who is also not going to partake. It doesn't necessarily have to be somebody who's in recovery. It can be somebody who just chooses not to participate, because that's just how they roll, and that's fine. I think, though, you know, you can do a lot of planning and a lot of, you know, avoidance, which might be what needs to happen. But I really, really believe that the most important thing to do if you're trying to stay sober at any time, it doesn't have to be during the holidays, but at any time, is to understand what triggers you, to understand yourself well enough to know how to assess your emotions, to understand yourself well enough to know why you want to use again, and to really be able to think through that drink or think through that pill or whatever the case might be. What's on the other side of it? Because most of the time what's on the other side of it is not something good. And if you can understand why you want to drink, if you can understand why you want to use, what's going on inside of you that is pushing you towards something that you worked so hard to get free from, if you can understand why you want to do that, and you can think through it and look at the consequences that are waiting for you on the other side of that, I really, really believe that is going to be one of the most important things in keeping yourself sober. Have somebody that you can talk to, that you can be honest with and say, hey, I'm really struggling. You know, if you're somebody who didn't do the 12-step programs and you don't have a sponsor, that's okay. I don't have a sponsor, but I do have people in my life that I can trust to listen to me without judgment if I'm struggling and I want to have a drink or I want to take a pill. Now, I don't keep alcohol in the house. I don't have anything in the house that would give me the escape that I'm looking for. I just don't keep substances like that around, because I know if they are here and if I want to escape for a little bit, odds are, if they're in the house, I will use them. So I just simply don't have them in the house. There are some people who are in recovery who can take a drink now and then. And I think that it's dishonest to say that, you know, if you're in recovery and you have one drink, you know, you're right back to square one. I don't agree with that. I think that there are some people who, you know, as long as they're doing it safely and legally, they can partake. And they know their limits, and they don't go beyond those limits, and they're fine. And I'm not going to pretend otherwise. That's not me. I can't do that. Especially if I'm here. You know, if I'm with friends or something, and I can just, you know, I can have one drink, that's fine. But if I'm dealing with some depression or some stress, and I want an escape, it would be very easy for me to do too much. And I know that about myself. So I just don't keep those things in the house. That goes back to having a plan, knowing my triggers, knowing how I process my emotions, knowing that if something is available to me, I'm very likely going to partake of it because I know that it will make me feel better for a little bit. And so for me, thinking through the drink is understanding that I just can't have the drink in the house at all. At all. Ever. That's how I keep myself safe. I don't see any point in putting things in my own way. And I don't miss it. I don't miss it at all. If you're early in your recovery, I know it seems like, you know, stress from the holidays, just stress from life in general. It feels like it's never going to get easier, that it's always going to be just damn near impossible not to have a drink or use when you want to, when you need to feel better. And I'm here to tell you it does get easier. I can't even remember the last time I had a drink. And not because I drank so much I can't remember. I mean, it's just been that long. I think I had a beer like a year and a half ago, maybe. And I was with friends, and, you know, that was it. Went home, went about my day, or my night, as it were. Now I will say, in the interest of full disclosure, when I was going through my, recovery from my surgery, a friend wanted to help me, and so she gave me she arranged for some pot brownies to be dropped off to me. Now, I've never had weed before, and I thought, I took a little bite, didn't feel anything. I thought, well, I must need more, so I took another bite. Then about 40 minutes later, the first bite hit, and that was pleasant. And then I braced myself because I'm like, oh boy, that second bite is coming up. And it was literally the most terrifying experience of my life. And I have no interest whatsoever in anything to do with weed ever again. It was a horrifying experience. So that was my, I guess, that was a slip up. If we can even call it. It was just total lack of experience and understanding of what I was doing. And, at 45 years old, I had never partaken before, and I don't intend to ever again. It was horrifying. But other than that, I have stayed the course. And there is not a day when I think, man, what I was like as an addict, when I was in active addiction, was so great, and life was so good. I wish I could get back to that. Never. And when I remember what life was like when I was in active addiction, there is not one single thing about it that makes me miss those days. There is nothing so great about any escape that I was able to experience that made it worth it. Nothing that I experienced from taking pills or drinking that was so awesome that it made it worth what I missed out because I wasn't fully present. And I have so many regrets, and I will probably have those regrets for the rest of my life. And I have to constantly remind myself that I cannot, and I don't deserve to be punished every day of the rest of my life for things that I did when I was in active addiction. I was sick. I was making bad choices because my mind and my body were sick. And if I had been healthy, I wouldn't have made those choices. And I really want you to hear that if you're in recovery, especially if you're early in your recovery and you're just beginning to understand the gravity of what you've experienced and the consequences it might be having on your life. You are responsible for the choices you made, but also understand you made those choices when you were sick. And allowing yourself some grace for that is going to be very important as you go forward. And it's going to be very important as those yearnings come up to take a substance that is going to help you escape for a little bit. Understand that when those yearnings, those urges come up, it's because in that moment, maybe your mind isn't the healthiest that it could be in that moment. And that is what is pulling you toward something that you worked so desperately hard to free yourself from. Give yourself grace. Forgive yourself for what you did when you were sick. Understand that the choices that you're making can either lead you further away from that, or they can take you right back to it. And understand, really think about, is anything that you experienced back then worth going back to? Is it really worth whatever escape you might have? Is going back to that worth those sometimes even just a few minutes of feeling really good? I can promise you it's not, and I promise you that if you take the time to think about it, you'll agree. I am going to leave some links in the description box for if you are somebody who's doing 12-step and you're having trouble getting to meetings because of the pandemic or whatever your reasons might be. There are online meetings available, and I think they're pretty much around the clock. And I will leave some links in the description box to help you find online meetings. And if you are interested in a different type of recovery program, I'm going to leave a link for Smart Recovery. But I would encourage you to connect with people who understand this struggle, who understand this sickness. And it is a sickness. People don't choose this. People don't wake up one day and think, you know what, if everything goes right in my life, I'm going to someday be a full-blown drug addict or an alcoholic. If I'm really, really lucky and I make all the best decisions, this is what's going to happen. This is going to be my fate. Nobody chooses this. This is something that you don't realize you have that you're prone toward until it's too late. I mean, when I started taking painkillers after my surgery to have my kidney taken out because of cancer, I had a surgery because there were other things going on too that they were dealing with. So I had a surgery that to close me up required 40 staples in my abdomen, and I was in a lot of pain for a long time. When I started taking those meds, I didn't think that I would develop an addiction. Never in a million years did I think that. I mean, I was like, I don't even take Tylenol. Why would this be a problem? And for a long time, I was in denial about it. And there was nothing that, nothing major that happened, nothing that snapped me to attention. It was just one day I looked at the life that I had created for myself and my son, and I thought, we deserve so much better than this. And the only way we're going to have something better than this is if I clean up. I have to get clean. And I did. And life is a lot better. It's a lot harder because I have, I still have to think through and process difficult things without that that crutch of a substance. And it's very interesting to me how quickly those things take hold, because I was in my 30s. I mean, I had never had an issue. I'm 45 now, so for most of my life, substances were not a problem for me, ever. But then just that quickly, they took hold and really interrupted my ability to process just the happenings of life without having them. And I'm having to learn. And I'm doing so much better than I was, but I had to learn and have to keep learning all over again how to process the things that happen in my life without resorting to taking a drink or popping a pill to make it all feel okay for a while. And I think that's an important thing too. Know that you're going to be okay. You will be okay. Whatever you are feeling that is having you, mistakenly believe that it would all be better if you could just have that drink or take that pill. Know that that will pass. And on the other side of it, you're going to be okay. That's not to say life will always be easy and life will never hurt. But that's not true for anybody. Whether you're a recovering addict or somebody who's never had an addiction of any kind whatsoever. Life is hard. Life is messy. Life is painful sometimes. But life is always, it's also pleasant and beautiful. And there are many, many days when life is just really good. And I was speaking earlier before I got so distracted about the fleeting nature of things. The bad feelings, the unpleasant feelings, those are fleeting. So are the good feelings. And if you can recognize the transient nature of everything we experience in life, none of it lasts. None of it does. And while we can become fatalistic about that and think, well, if it doesn't last forever, it's not worth having, we can also look at it from a different angle and say, if it doesn't last forever, I can get through it. I can get through this. And if it doesn't last forever, I'm going to savor these great feelings, these great moments, these great experiences for everything they're worth, because it doesn't last forever and I want to make the most of it. I've made the mistake many times of taking those great things for granted and then they're gone. And I've made the mistake of thinking that, and it's interesting because we worry about losing the good things because we know they don't last, that most things don't last forever. But then when the unpleasant things happen, the things we might label as bad, when those things happen, we somehow think that they're always going to be with us, that these bad, these unpleasant feelings, I'm really trying hard not to assign good or bad to this. It's not good or bad. It's just life happening. When these unpleasant feelings, though, happen, we think we're going to be we're going to be in that place forever. We never make that assumption when we're happy. We always wait for it to be taken away from us. But when we're feeling sad or angry or depressed or frustrated or stressed out, we think it's never going to get any better. And we might speak things and make decisions accordingly. The human mind is a very strange thing. But it'll pass. Not our minds, hopefully. Although I guess eventually that does pass too. But the experience we're having and the feelings we're having about those experiences, it'll pass. It'll pass. And that is something, from my perspective, that you can find comfort in. It'll pass, and you're gonna be okay. So, have a plan. Have a sober buddy. Have a trusted friend or friends you can talk to. Understand that your feelings are not facts. Understand that your feelings, pleasant or unpleasant, will pass. And on the other side of it, you're going to be okay. And what okay looks like for you and for me and for anyone else, it's going to be different for everybody. But you, in whatever okay looks like for you, you're going to be okay and you're going to get through it. I promise you that. So I hope this has been helpful. This video did not go as planned, but I hope that you still enjoyed what I managed to put together here. If anybody is watching who is or has been in recovery and you've found other resources other than the 12 steps or the Smart Recovery that I listed, please leave it in comments, because I know that no single program is going to be a great fit for everybody, and everybody has their own way of going about this. In fact, I think that the more resources that are listed, the better. So anyway, if you have other resources that you know of, I would love it if you could leave them in comments with some links, preferably if you have them. Thank you for hanging out with me today, for being here and listening to all this. If you want to know more about my own journey with addiction and so very many other things, my book, Razed, Evangelical, Losing My Faith and Finding Myself, is on Amazon. The paperback is $4.99. The ebook is $2.99. And it gets into a lot more detail about my struggle with addiction, what has happened, on the other side of active addiction. And even though the book was written a year ago, or published a year ago rather, it does give you a glimpse into how I process things now and do my best to stay on track. And so far so good. I haven't relapsed in several years, so but it's more than crossing my fingers. It's having a plan, and also understanding that if I were to relapse, which I have no intention of doing, but if that were to happen, it's not a permanent failure. If you relapse, the good news is you can always start over again, and you can have a sober day 1, and then a sober day 2, and then a sober day, 90 days sober. And it gets easier and easier the further away you get from it, from active destructive addiction. So relapse is not a permanent failure. So if you're watching this and thinking, I relapsed, I messed up, you know, everything's ruined forever. No, it's not. It'll pass as long as you do the work. Take care of yourselves. Be good to yourself. Be good to others. Don't shut all over yourself, and definitely don't shut all over other people. And I will see you again very soon. Bye.